Mr. Birdie, members of the board, we have 4 items for board discussion this evening. Our first is staffing needs for EL. Turn it over to Ms. Sloan.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, Mr. Birding, members of the board. I need to update you on our staffing needs for ESL program. So I did give you a handout here for you to reference during this. Just a quick comment about the handout at the very, very top. The title says as of 5/13/19. That should say as of 10/17/19. So as you know, at the end of the first quarter, English learner numbers are reviewed by the curriculum department in order to assess changing staffing needs. So as you can see, under the students column, we look at the total number of students that we had at the very beginning of the school year, and then we look at the numbers of the students that we have at the end of the first quarter. We then compare those numbers to the ESL staffing guidelines that were established in 2014-15 to see if we need to hire any additional tutors. So at this time, based on the staffing ratios that have been established, we need to add a full-time tutor at Central Elementary, a full-time at the freshman school, and a full-time at the high school. We also need to add an additional half-time tutor at West Elementary. So I just wanted to update you, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
Any questions? I do have one question. It says here, the freshman school, we need 3.27, but we only have 2. Do we need more than 1? Do we need 1.5?
So we have some other things that we typically talk about when we are deciding, whether or not to add 1 or add 1.5 or add 2. So based on, so typically those discussions are around like our newcomers, how many newcomers do we have, how many students, might be more advanced, maybe they've exited the OELPA and we're just progress monitoring. So all of those different things are part of the discussion. So at this time, we felt like the staffing at the freshman school with their ESL teachers and the number of tutors they have, that we will be okay to move forward with just the 1 additional tutor.
Okay. And then, so from the start of school year, which was August 15th, 20th, something, 2 months, we had a 16.34 increase in just ESL students.
Yes.
Does ODE know about that? I'm sure they do, right? See what they do with it.
They know everything.
So are you just needing a head nod from the board to move forward, I'm assuming? So we need to be compliant, right? So, all right. Thank you.
All right, our next item for board discussion, actually our next 2 items. Ms. Lane will be leading those presentations, Student Wellness and Success Funding Plan and the 5-year forecast. Turn it over to Nance.
Thank you. The board may recall on October 3rd at our work session, I presented a school funding update, and included with that update was our student wellness and success funding that we're receiving from the state. I'd like to present to you tonight our plan for that funding. We talked a little bit about that. Then we've received half the money for this year so far. The other half, I believe, will be coming in February. And just as a reminder, this money is not included in the 5-year forecast, but what you'll see with the plan is some of the expenditures that are in the 5-year forecast will now be paid for by this money. And so that means we'll reduce some expenditures this year and next year, but then the following year in '22, those expenditures go back 100% into the general fund 5-year forecast. So we'll get to that at the next presentation, but just as a refresher, these are the allowable initiatives that this money is spent for. So it's restricted money, I guess you could say, in a way. We have to partner with one of the partner agencies, and then spend the money according to one of these categories. So here's our plan for the next 2 years. The expenditures were only allowed to be spent on anything that incurred, any expenditures that incurred after October 17th. So you'll see a lot of partial words up there, partial payment, because I'm only allowed to calculate it based on, from October 17th forward. So again, we'll receive about $683,000. Our planned expenditures this year will help to offset our costs for our school resource officers, our community success liaisons that we have in our buildings. The safety officer assists us with safety and security planning, so that's a partial payment for that service. Also, we employ a homeless foster liaison through the Butler County Educational Service Center. So you'll see that we're hitting student-centered items. Behavior intervention specialists is a special services purchase service. We are also we have 2 ESL community liaisons in our district, so we are covering a portion of that service. And we also are looking to add another success liaison at our secondary level this year, and that is actually in process right now with hiring for that person. And we plan to keep that position next year also, using these funds. Our current elementary counselors, right now, we have 3 full-time counselors for 6 of our buildings. A portion of their salary is allowed to be paid from these funds because they do deal a lot with the mental health aspects for our elementary students. So our estimated expenditures for this year is $458,635. We are allowed to carry over any money left, so we are going to use that in the next year, which I'll show you next, for fiscal year '21. We are expected to receive a little over $960,000 next year, and I can begin using that money July 1. So you'll see some of those expenditures increase. But basically, the additional pieces to this is the plan to hire 3 new additional elementary counselors next year. So we will offset part of that cost, as you see, for the 3 new elementary counselors, as well as continuing to pay for the current elementary counselors, a portion. So we're allowed to charge 50% of their salary out of these funds. And then also we're providing a one-time payment to the Fairfield Prevention Coalition for $10,000. So it's estimated that we'll spend $803,484 of fiscal year '21 monies. So we'll actually have a little more to carry over for a 3rd year. And at that time, we will utilize that money, again, to spend on our school resource officers, continuing with our success liaison cost, and that will end our success, wellness and success funding. Again, this is restricted money. We're only allowed to spend it on certain items. And that beginning in year '22, fiscal year '22, we don't know whether we're going to continue to see that money because there'll be a new budget bill, or whether that will disappear. So that, in a nutshell, is our plan for our school wellness.
Any questions for Mrs. Lane about the wellness? Okay, thank you.
Okay. So now we're going to tie all these presentations, almost all of them, together into the 5-year forecast. So you should have a copy of the presentation in your packets tonight. And as you surely know by now, we present this twice a year. It's basically our financial roadmap for the district. I'll be back again in May with an update, and hopefully things will look better. Trying to be optimistic, but this is required for the board to approve this in at least once per year. And as you'll see, not much has changed with our revenue side as opposed to our expenditure side. We continue to see 45%, of course, of our revenue coming from our local property taxes, and about 35 to 40% coming from our state, and that includes the property tax allocation piece, which is a reimbursement from the state for taxes. But state funding, between the state funding and the state restricted aid, it's about 35% of our total revenues. Again, details haven't changed a whole lot since last May. We are showing little to no growth in many of our categories, including state funding. There's a slight growth in public utility personal property, but that is such a minute piece of our revenue that it's great that it's growing, but it doesn't add a whole lot of revenue to our books. Again, property tax allocation is fairly flat for the remainder of the forecast, and our other operating revenues is where we house our open enrollment piece, which has been steady at $1.8 million per year. Casino revenue is fairly steady too at $527,000 for the year. And then we have flat projections for the remaining years of the forecast. So for this year, we're looking at maybe 0.25% increase in our revenue. More exciting piece is our expenditures, which you see 57% goes to salaries, 19% to benefits. That's pretty stable as far as our expenditures go. It's 76% for both of those. And with our salaries, we have some expiring union agreements this year for all of our unions. So we will be entering negotiations coming up in winter, spring time period with all of our groups. As it stands right now, we're still projecting 2.25% salary increases for all staff for the life of the forecast. This year, we have added those positions as listed, and as you'll see at the bottom in very small print, the positions that were added after the start of this year includes the 3.5 ESL tutors that Mandy just presented, as well as a preschool teacher, because our population's growing there, as well as a preschool educational assistant. So we're looking at about $786,000 additional costs this year for those positions as listed. Next year, our plan is, of course, to expand the academy, so we'll need 2 additional teachers there, along with a speech pathologist, instructional specialist for our technology program, the one-to-one program we're going to roll out, and also the 3 additional guidance counselors at the elementary level, again, partially funded by that student wellness and success money. So that brings total projected costs for next year at a little over $384,000. With our retirement and insurance benefits, we, again, are very, I think, lucky to be a part of the Optimal Health Initiatives, Butler Health Plan Consortium. We received a 0% increase this year in premium. Next year, starting in January, we're only receiving a 2% increase, and that's for medical only. Dental, there's no increase. So if you have listened to other private sector people talk, 2% is awfully good. Trend is getting at least double digits nowadays. So we are projecting a 5% increase for fiscal year 21, and then 7% increases for the remaining years of the forecast. I've also included all those positions that you saw on the prior 2 screens into this line item. And this is where it gets interesting. Purchase services. As you know, we have a paving plan in place. We have our bus lease and HVAC lease that will continue. The resource officers, again, that's partially funded, so that's not a true total number, but that's what's left over that general fund will pay for. And then also we have additional services provided by this Butler County Educational Service Center. Many of those are special education positions that we need. We're also looking at possibly some elevator repairs and some new software that hopefully will streamline the process for both a parent, Final Forms, parent point, and district level staff to help with more efficiency there. And then Mr. Penny presented our facility usage software at a prior meeting. That's included also. So this year, we're looking at about $1.7 million in those expenditures for purchase services. Next year is when it gets really interesting. The Ed Choice Scholarship piece is where this is the line item that this is included with. Again, I have the projected $3,373,500 there. We also are looking at when the storage transportation building is built, that we can demolish that lovely transportation office that's there now and take that out and then include that in our paving plan to expand our parking there, and then also pave the new area where the new storage transportation building is going to be. So the paving plan continues along with some extra work for next year. Oh, yes, that's about $5 million right there, planned for purchase services. Supplies and materials, many of these are continuances of what we do now. We've set aside $40,000 each year for the district music department to purchase instruments or any type of materials that they need. And then we continue to fund the textbook material, testing, College Credit Plus areas. And you'll see this year a new expenditure for advanced placement exams, which the board agreed to do last year. And we needed some radio repeaters in some of our buildings. So that brings our total cost, projected cost for this year of $1,351,450. Next year, we continue with the same, basically the same plans. You'll recall that part of the one-to-one technology plan is that we were going to use a portion of that textbook material money to help fund the one-to-one plan. Capital outlay is where you see our technology plan. The one-to-one plan is included with that. That is only the portion that will come from, I'll say, outside of the curriculum and technology budgets. $535,500 was what was left, so that will be funded this year to purchase computers for next year. I've also included our baseball, softball complex restrooms that we are now complete, and our athletic boosters the other night at the meeting. We're very grateful for that building. Stadium ticket booth and arch is also finished, looks great. Storage transportation building and our dock for that is in process. And academy expansion is also getting ready to be started. And we have a few other repairs that we need to make, a replacement for a salt barn too. So that is a little over $2.3 million this year. And next year is not completely there because we are still with a facility assessment information that may change our projected expenditures for next year, but we don't have that information yet. So hopefully by May, we will have that and I'll be able to update this. But again, the technology plan is included in this and also our bus plan for 5 buses every year. And the last line item for other expenditures, that includes our auditor and treasurer fees. I have not heard if we're going to get a refund this year for our auditor fees yet, so I didn't count on it. So I put that back in to our forecast this year. And then also, this is the line item where it shows the open enrollment that we lose out to other districts at the 1.35 million. So it's a net gain between the two of incoming and outgoing of about $472,000 for the district. So projected expenditure increase for this year is about 5%. Which leads us to the visual of the blue representing our revenue, the red representing our expenditures, and the green line rapidly decreasing, which is our cash balance. The numbers show that we are starting deficit spending this year at about $1.8 million. That can change over the course of the year depending on salaries, benefits, things that change with those. But as you can see, we rapidly fall into that deficit spending a few years down the road. So we are using our cash reserves to make up for that. And year 5 is a long way off, and many, many things will change by then. I think I would recommend that the board not panic too much, but look at the gray areas first. We will have a new budget bill for fiscal year 22, so that may change some things depending on what's put in that bill. Also, again, the ed choice discussion can totally change this picture, so things hopefully change with that. But yeah, that's our picture as it stands right now in October. I will be glad to answer any questions.
Questions or comments from the board?
Well, thanks for putting this together, Mrs. Lane. It's a lot of work. It's, oh, boy. things look a little grim there, but I've got to remain positive that things are going to work out with that choice. And we'll keep plowing and going on.
Again, this is not Mrs. Lane's 5-year forecast.
Right.
It is the school district's 5-year forecast.
Thank you, Mr. Birding.
Mr. Hare always made that point, so.
Well, as my team members will attest, I've gone in and asked all of them, okay, did I miss anything? Is there anything, tell me. It is a group effort.
I mean, it is not great news,
No.
obviously. And we got a less than 0.25% increase in funding for next year, right? Is that what I read that? And so, but our teachers get 2.25%.
That's negotiated. That is not set in stone.
I mean, for this year, I mean,
This
this current year, they're at
current year has already
2.25.
been taken.
And so we're assuming maybe 2.25, so that doesn't even cover that.
That is up for negotiations in the spring. I think it's unrealistic to not put anything in the forecast for
Right.
raises.
Right.
And we have worked so hard to try to retain quality teachers that we don't want to fall behind other districts who are now have finished their negotiations and have awarded what I would say decent raises for staff. We're trying to keep the best of the best, so.
And I apologize for making that comment that it was 2.25 for next year. I meant for this current year, yeah. Okay,
It's 2.5.
2.5 for,
It's 2.9.
2.9 for teachers, 2.5, I believe, for or classified staff.
okay.
2.25. Now you have me, wait a minute. Now you have me wondering, hold on.
That was just going back to
Trying
that
remember.
slide where it said 2.25, but that was for.
That
you-
was for-
You were projecting, right.
Projecting, yes.
And I mistaken that as that's what it is now. So that was on me. Sorry about that. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mrs. Lane.
Thank you.
Next item is board policies.
Yep, that is our last item for board discussion. We have 4 up for discussion this evening. I'll turn it over to Mr. Penny for the first one.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Birding, members of the board, I have policy EEA, student transportation services, as an item for board discussion this evening. As you review the proposed changes, you will find a majority of the updates are to provide clarification within the language regarding our transportation services. I would like to highlight a few of these updates. So I'd like you to look at the second paragraph to start with. You will find the second paragraph is new to this policy. The paragraph refers to compliance with statutory obligations and is recommended language from OSBA. This is in response to a change enacted in Ohio Revised Code that states districts cannot reduce transportation service levels during an active school year. So, for example, if we wanted to discontinue transportation services that aren't required by the state, for instance, high school transportation, based on, I believe it was House Bill 166, but the new Ohio Revised Code legislation, we could not discontinue those services during an active school year. So let's say it was November or December or January, and we said we'd like to discontinue the services. We would have to carry those through the whole rest of the year, and then at the completion of the school year, the following year, we could start with those changes. So that was a major change that was put in place, and it was the catalyst to this policy being reviewed again. Along with the review of this policy, and you'll notice there's many different changes. A lot of them are just language updates, clarifications that more accurately define how we need to operate within transportation services. You'll also find language updates regarding organizational hierarchy or operational hierarchy, annual bus stop adoptions, and levels of transportation for students. And at this point, I'd like to go ahead and hand it over to you guys to see if you have any questions regarding the changes within this policy.
Questions from the board? Comments? Thank you, Mr. Penny.
All right, I have two policies for you to discuss this evening. The first one is policy CD, which is about the management team. Both of the policies that I'm presenting this evening were written in 1995, so back when the first number was a 1, or the 2000s now. So there are no major updates to either of the policies I'm presenting, just making the language a little more current with how OSBA writes the policies now. There really are no substantial changes to the management team, other than cross-references. We've added 2 new cross-references and changed the name of 1. That's policy CD. Are there any questions about that one?
No.
The next policy, same thing, policy FL, retirement of facilities. There are the basic changes. Instead of referring to children, we call them students in the policy. Couple small language changes. The legal references have changed, so those have been updated, and we didn't have any cross-references for this one, and so we now have added 4 cross-references. Any questions about policy FL?
Hearing none.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. So,
So I have policy IF, curriculum development. This policy has also not been updated since 1995, which, by the way, is the year I graduated from high school, so. So, again, it's getting a refresh on the language to make it more current with OSBA policy. References to the centrally coordinated approach have been removed. Those have been replaced with stakeholder groups that should be involved in the curriculum development process. Also, certificated has been replaced by professional, and the word designee has been added so that the superintendent can appoint a designee to do that work. Legal references have also been updated, and some cross-references have been added.
thank you very much.